Sometimes the most ordinary moments become the most extraordinary stories. Picture this: you're doing your job, following routine protocols, when suddenly, your world shifts completely. What happens when duty meets destiny? When a simple assignment becomes a life-altering encounter? This is the story of Sarah Martinez, a dedicated Navy personnel who thought she knew exactly what her night would bring. She was wrong. What started as a routine watch at an ammunition depot became the beginning of something she never saw coming. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives arrive unannounced, wearing combat boots and carrying secrets that will change everything. Are you ready to discover what happens when protocol meets passion, when duty collides with desire, and when a simple yes sir becomes the beginning of an unforgettable journey? This is that story. The humid Florida air clung to Petty Officer Second Class Sarah Martinez like a second skin as she made her way across the naval base. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded her of home in California. She had been stationed at Naval Base Jacksonville for 8 months now, and, while she had grown accustomed to the routine, tonight felt different somehow. Maybe it was the storm clouds gathering on the horizon, or maybe it was the unusual tension she had noticed among the senior staff throughout the day. Sarah had always been the type of person who noticed things others missed. It was a trait that had served her well in the Navy, earning her recognition for her attention to detail and reliability. Her commanding officers trusted her with important assignments, and tonight was no exception. She had been selected for ammunition depot watch duty, a responsibility that required both vigilance and discretion. As she approached the security checkpoint, Sarah adjusted her uniform and checked her watch. 1847 hours. She was early, as always. The guard on duty, Petty Officer Johnson, looked up from his clipboard and nodded in acknowledgement. Evening, Martinez. Ready for another exciting night of watching paint dry? Johnson's attempt at humor fell flat in the heavy air. Sarah smiled politely. Someone's got to do it, Johnson. Besides, I hear there might be some activity tonight. Johnson's expression shifted slightly. Activity? What kind of activity? Not sure. Chief Williams just said to be extra alert and follow all protocols to the letter. Sarah shrugged, but, internally, she felt a flutter of curiosity. In her experience, when the chiefs emphasized protocol, it usually meant something important was happening. The ammunition depot was located in a secured section of the base, surrounded by multiple layers of fencing and monitored by an extensive camera system. It was where the base stored its most sensitive ordnance, from standard ammunition to specialized equipment that Sarah wasn't even cleared to know about. Her job was simple in theory: monitor the perimeter, check credentials of anyone who approached, and report any irregularities. In practice, it was often hours of silence broken only by the occasional patrol and the distant sound of aircraft operations. Sarah relieved the previous watch, Seaman Rodriguez, who seemed eager to leave his post. Anything to report? She asked, settling into the guard booth. Rodriguez gathered his gear quickly. Quiet as usual. Though. He paused, glancing around nervously. There's been some chatter on the radio about a special inspection or something. Might want to stay sharp tonight. After Rodriguez left, Sarah began her routine checks. She reviewed the access logs, tested the communication equipment, and familiarized herself with the evening's scheduled activities. According to her briefing, there should be minimal traffic in the area until the next shift change. The depot would be effectively closed to all but emergency personnel. The first 2 hours passed without incident. Sarah made her rounds every 30 minutes, checking the perimeter fencing and ensuring all security measures were functioning properly. The storm clouds she had noticed earlier were moving closer, and she could hear the distant rumble of thunder. Florida storms could be intense, and she hoped any weather-related issues wouldn't complicate her watch. At 2,130 hours, Sarah was reviewing maintenance reports when she heard the sound of an approaching vehicle. This was unusual, as no vehicles were scheduled to access the depot after 2,100 hours according to her briefings. She looked up from her paperwork to see headlights approaching through the security gate. The vehicle was a standard military sedan, dark-colored and bearing baseplates. As it drew closer, Sarah could see that it contained at least 2 occupants, but the tinted windows made it difficult to identify them. Her training kicked in immediately. Any unscheduled access required verification and documentation, regardless of who was requesting entry. Sarah stepped out of the guard booth and positioned herself at the vehicle checkpoint. The sedan came to a stop, and she approached the driver's side window, which rolled down to reveal a Navy Chief Petty Officer she didn't recognize. "Good evening, Chief. I'll need to see your authorization for depot access," Sarah said, maintaining professional composure while internally noting every detail about the situation. The chief handed her a set of documents. "Special inspection, Petty Officer. We're conducting an unscheduled security assessment." Sarah examined the paperwork carefully. The documents appeared to be in order, bearing the appropriate seals and signatures, but something felt off. The timing was unusual, and she hadn't received any notification about special inspections. Her training had emphasized that when in doubt, verify through proper channels. "Chief, I'm going to need to confirm this authorization through command." "Standard protocol for unscheduled access," Sarah explained, stepping back toward her communication equipment. It was then that the passenger door opened, and Sarah's world shifted completely. The man who emerged from the vehicle was unlike anyone she had encountered on base before. He was tall, probably 6 feet 2, with broad shoulders that filled out his uniform in a way that spoke of serious physical conditioning. His bearing was unmistakably military, but there was something more, an intensity in his posture that commanded attention without demanding it. Even in the dim light of the security area, Sarah could see the distinctive insignia on his uniform that identified him as a Navy SEAL. But it wasn't just his rank or his physical presence that caught Sarah off guard. There was something about his face, weathered by sun and experience, that suggested he had seen things most people never would. His eyes, even from a distance, seemed to take in everything at once, assessing the situation with the calculated precision of someone accustomed to high-stakes environments. "Is there a problem, Petty Officer?" His voice was deep and steady, with just a hint of what might have been a southern accent. There was no aggression in his tone, but there was an unmistakable authority that made Sarah's pulse quicken. Sarah straightened her shoulders, reminding herself that regardless of who this man was, she had a job to do. "No sir, no problem. I'm just following standard verification procedures for unscheduled access to the depot." The SEAL officer nodded approvingly. "Good. What's your name, Petty Officer?" "Martinez, sir." "Petty Officer Second Class Sarah Martinez." "Well, Petty Officer Martinez, you're doing exactly what you should be doing. I'm Commander Jack Mitchell, and I appreciate thorough security protocols." He moved closer, and Sarah caught a subtle scent of soap and something else, maybe leather or gun oil. "However, this is a time-sensitive operation, and I'm going to need you to expedite your verification process." Sarah felt a conflict between her duty to follow procedures and the natural inclination to defer to a senior officer, especially one whose presence seemed to carry such weight. Commander Mitchell wasn't using his rank to intimidate her, but his very presence was intimidating in ways she couldn't quite articulate. "Sir, I understand the urgency, but I need to contact my chief to confirm the authorization. It should only take a few minutes." Commander Mitchell studied her for a moment, and Sarah felt as though he was evaluating not just her words but her character. Finally, he nodded. "Make your call, Petty Officer Martinez. But I want you to know that what we're doing here tonight is important, and your cooperation is appreciated." As Sarah moved toward her communication equipment, she was acutely aware of Commander Mitchell's presence behind her. She had been around military personnel her entire naval career, but there was something different about this man. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had been tested in ways most people never would be, and he had clearly passed those tests. Sarah contacted her duty chief, Chief Williams, and explained the situation. There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by what sounded like muffled conversation. When Chief Williams came back on the line, his tone was different than usual. "Martinez, you're to provide full cooperation to Commander Mitchell and his team. This is a legitimate operation with proper authorization. Clear them for access immediately." "Understood, Chief. Clearing for access now." Sarah returned to Commander Mitchell and the Chief Petty Officer, who had remained by their vehicle during her verification call. "Sir, you're cleared for access. Is there anything specific you need from me regarding your operation?" Commander Mitchell's expression softened slightly, and, for the first time, Sarah caught a glimpse of what might have been approval in his eyes. "You handled that exactly right, Petty Officer Martinez. Professional and thorough. I need you to maintain normal security protocols while we're conducting our assessment. If anyone else approaches the depot tonight, you follow the same procedures you just followed with us. Yes, sir. And, Martinez? Commander Mitchell paused as he prepared to return to the vehicle. What we're doing here tonight is classified. I'm sure you understand what that means. Absolutely, sir. As the sedan proceeded through the checkpoint and toward the main depot buildings, Sarah watched until the taillights disappeared around a corner. She returned to her guard booth, but her mind was racing. In 8 months of naval service, she had never encountered anyone quite like Commander Mitchell. There had been something about his presence that was both professional and intensely personal at the same time. Sarah tried to refocus on her duties, but she found herself glancing toward the depot buildings every few minutes. She wondered what kind of assessment required a SEAL commander to personally visit an ammunition depot at night. SEALs were typically involved in special operations that had little to do with routine-based security or standard ammunition storage. About an hour later, Sarah heard footsteps approaching her position. Commander Mitchell appeared out of the darkness, walking alone. This time, he approached her guard booth directly. "Petty Officer Martinez, could I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course, sir." Commander Mitchell looked around the area, as if ensuring they were alone. "I wanted to personally thank you for your professionalism tonight. It's clear you take your responsibilities seriously." "Thank you, sir. Just doing my job." "It's more than that, though, isn't it? You could have simply waved us through when you saw my rank, but you followed proper procedures. That kind of attention to detail and integrity is exactly what we need in the Navy." Sarah felt a flush of pride, but also confusion. Why was a SEAL commander taking time to personally compliment a petty officer on routine security procedures? "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, what kind of assessment requires a SEAL team at an ammunition depot?" Commander Mitchell smiled for the first time since arriving, and the expression transformed his face completely. The intensity remained, but there was also warmth there, and something that might have been humor. "That's a good question, Petty Officer Martinez. The kind of question someone with your attention to detail should be asking." He paused, studying her face in the dim light. "Let's just say that not all of our ammunition is standard issue, and not all of our security assessments are routine." Sarah nodded, understanding that she had received as much of an answer as she was going to get. But she also sensed that Commander Mitchell was sharing more with her than he typically would with someone in her position. "Will you be conducting similar assessments in the future, sir?" "That depends on what we find tonight, and on whether we can count on the same level of professional cooperation we've received from you." There was something in his tone that suggested his words carried meaning beyond their literal content. Sarah felt as though they were having two conversations simultaneously, the professional exchange appropriate to their ranks, and something else entirely. "You can count on my cooperation, sir." Commander Mitchell nodded slowly. "I believe I can, Petty Officer Martinez. I believe I can." As he prepared to leave, Commander Mitchell turned back one more time. "Sarah, may I call you Sarah when we're speaking privately?" The use of her first name sent a jolt of electricity through her. Senior officers rarely used first names with enlisted personnel, especially in formal settings. "Yes, sir, that would be fine." "Good. And you can call me Jack when we're not in front of other personnel. I have a feeling we're going to be working together more closely in the future." With that, Commander Mitchell, Jack, disappeared back into the darkness toward the depot buildings. Sarah remained at her post, but her mind was reeling. In the span of a few hours, her routine assignment had become something entirely different. She had encountered a man who seemed to embody everything she had imagined about elite military personnel: competence, confidence, and an undeniable presence that made her pulse race. But, more than that, she sensed that their brief interaction had created a connection that neither of them had expected. The way he had looked at her, the way he had taken time to personally acknowledge her professionalism, and especially the way he had invited her to use his first name suggested that he had felt something too. As the night continued, Sarah found herself hoping that Commander Mitchell would stop by her position again before leaving. She told herself it was simply professional curiosity about his mission, but she knew there was more to it than that. For the first time since joining the Navy, she felt truly seen and appreciated by someone whose opinion mattered to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. The storm that had been threatening all evening finally arrived, bringing with it rain that drummed against the roof of the guard booth. But Sarah barely noticed the weather. Her attention was focused entirely on the depot buildings and the possibility that the most intriguing man she had ever met might emerge from the darkness once more before the night was over. The rain intensified as Sarah continued her watch, creating a rhythmic backdrop to her increasingly restless thoughts. Every shadow seemed to hold the possibility of Commander Mitchell's return, and every sound made her look up expectantly from her paperwork. She had never experienced anything quite like this anticipation, this heightened awareness that came from a brief encounter with someone who had somehow managed to capture her complete attention. At 0147 hours, her patience was rewarded. Through the rain-streaked windows of the guard booth, she saw a figure approaching through the storm. Even before she could make out his features clearly, she knew it was Jack. There was something distinctive about his stride, confident and purposeful despite the weather. He knocked gently on the door of the guard booth, and Sarah quickly opened it, stepping back to allow him inside. Water dripped from his uniform, and his hair was darkened by the rain, but he seemed completely unbothered by the storm. Rough night for outdoor operations, Sarah observed, closing the door behind him. Jack smiled, shaking water from his hands. I've worked in worse conditions. Though I have to admit, a warm, dry guard booth has its appeal right about now. The booth suddenly felt much smaller with both of them inside it. Sarah was acutely aware of Jack's presence, the way he filled the space not just physically but with an energy that seemed to charge the air around them. She offered him a towel from her emergency supplies, and, when their hands briefly touched as he accepted it, she felt a shock of connection that had nothing to do with static electricity. "How is your assessment going, sir?" Sarah asked, trying to maintain professional composure while her heart rate accelerated. "Jack, remember? And it's going well. Better than expected, actually." He dried his face and hands with the towel, his movements economical and precise. "We're nearly finished with the initial evaluation. Should be wrapped up within the hour. Will you be filing a report with Base Command?" Jack paused in his drying and looked at her with what seemed like increased interest. "You really do pay attention to the details, don't you?" "Yes, there will be a report, but not through normal channels. This operation falls under Special Operations Command." Sarah nodded, understanding that she had reached the limits of what he could share with her. But she was curious about more than just his mission. "Have you been a SEAL commander long?" "About 3 years now. I've been in the teams for 8 years total." Jack settled into the small chair across from Sarah's desk, apparently in no hurry to return to the rain. "What about you? How long have you been Navy?" 2 years active duty, though I was in ROTC during college. This is my first real assignment outside of training." "What made you choose the Navy?" Sarah considered the question. It was personal, but something about Jack's genuine interest made her want to share more than she typically would with a superior officer. "My father was Navy. He served on submarines during the Cold War. I grew up hearing his stories about the importance of service, about being part of something bigger than yourself. He must be proud of you." "He was." Sarah's voice softened. "He passed away 2 years ago, right before I completed officer candidate school." "Cancer." Jack's expression shifted, becoming more serious and sympathetic. "I'm sorry for your loss. Losing a parent is never easy, but it sounds like he gave you something valuable before he left." "He did. He taught me that integrity isn't just about following rules, it's about doing the right thing even when no one is watching, even when it's difficult." "Is that why you insisted on verifying our authorization tonight, even though it might have been easier to just wave us through?" Sarah met his gaze directly. "Partly. But also because something felt important about your mission, and important things deserve proper attention." Jack studied her face for a long moment, and Sarah felt as though he was seeing not just her words but her character. "You know, Sarah, in my line of work, I meet a lot of people. Most of them are competent, some of them are exceptional, but very few of them have the kind of instinctive understanding of duty and honor that you demonstrated tonight." "Thank you. That means a lot, coming from you." "Why? Because of my rank?" Sarah shook her head. "Because of who you are. I can tell you're someone who doesn't give praise lightly." Jack leaned back in his chair, and, for the first time since entering the booth, he seemed to relax slightly. "You're right about that. In special operations, we learn to evaluate people quickly and accurately. Lives depend on being able to trust your teammates absolutely. Is that what this is?" An evaluation? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that neither of them had explicitly acknowledged. Sarah realized she was asking about more than just his professional assessment of her capabilities. Jack's answer came slowly, thoughtfully. It started as one. But it's become something more complicated than that. Sarah felt her breath catch. They were venturing into territory that was both exhilarating and dangerous. Military regulations were clear about relationships between officers and enlisted personnel, but the connection she felt with Jack seemed to transcend normal military hierarchies. Complicated how? Before Jack could answer, the radio on Sarah's desk crackled to life. Guard Post 7, this is Base Patrol. We're conducting routine perimeter checks. What's your status? Sarah reached for the radio, but Jack caught her hand gently. The touch sent electricity through her entire body. Tell them everything is secure and quiet, he said softly. Sarah keyed the microphone, very aware of Jack's hand still covering hers. Base Patrol, Guard Post 7. All secure, no incidents to report. Copy that, Guard Post 7. Continuing patrol. When the radio fell silent, Jack didn't immediately release her hand. Instead, he turned it over gently, studying her palm as though he could read something important there. You have strong hands, he observed. Capable hands. Sarah's voice came out softer than she intended. They've been trained for Navy work. It's more than training. Some people are naturally suited for responsibility, for making decisions under pressure. Jack finally released her hand, but his eyes remained fixed on her face. I think you're one of those people. Is that your professional opinion, Commander? Call me Jack, remember? And, no, that's my personal opinion. The distinction was important, and they both knew it. Personal opinions suggested personal interest, and personal interest between a SEAL commander and a petty officer was complicated territory indeed. Thunder crashed overhead, loud enough to rattle the windows of the guard booth. The storm was intensifying, and Sarah realized that Jack's team would likely need to wait for conditions to improve before completing their mission. Will the weather affect your operation? She asked. Jack glanced toward the windows, where rain was now coming down in sheets. We'll adapt. We always do. Though it might mean a longer night than originally planned. That's fine with me. I mean, from a security standpoint. It's important to maintain proper oversight of the depot regardless of weather conditions. Jack smiled at her careful phrasing. Of course. Proper oversight is essential. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, listening to the storm rage outside. Sarah found herself studying Jack's face in the soft light of the guard booth. He was probably in his early 30s, with lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent outdoors and in challenging conditions. There was a small scar along his jawline, barely visible but somehow adding to rather than detracting from his appeal. Can I ask you something personal? Jack said eventually. Sarah nodded. Are you always this serious, or is it just the uniform and the situation? The question surprised her. I don't think I'm serious. I think I'm focused. There's a difference? Being serious suggests that you can't find humor or joy in what you're doing. Being focused just means you care about doing it well. Jack nodded appreciatively. I like that distinction. In my work, we talk about being serious about the mission while maintaining the ability to find lightness in the human connections that make the mission worthwhile. Do you? Find those connections, I mean? Jack's expression became more thoughtful. Not as often as I'd like. Special operations can be isolating. You spend a lot of time with your team, but civilian relationships can be challenging when your work is classified and dangerous. Sarah sensed there was more to that statement, perhaps experiences with relationships that hadn't survived the demands of his career. Do you ever regret choosing this path? No. Never. But I sometimes wonder what I might have missed along the way. Jack looked directly at her. What about you? Do you see yourself staying in the Navy long term? I hope so. I love the structure, the sense of purpose, the feeling of being part of something important. Sarah paused. Though I have to admit, tonight has shown me that there are aspects of Navy life I hadn't considered before. Such as? Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. such as the possibility of meeting people who challenge you to see yourself and your possibilities differently. Jack leaned forward slightly, his attention completely focused on her. Is that what's happening here? Are you seeing yourself differently? I think so. For 2 years, I've thought of myself primarily as a sailor, as someone defined by duty and regulation and protocol. Tonight, I feel like a woman who happens to be a sailor. The admission was more revealing than Sarah had intended, but something about Jack's presence made honesty feel not just safe but necessary. And how does that feel? Being a woman who happens to be a sailor? Complicated, Sarah said, echoing his earlier word. But also exciting. Jack stood and moved to the window, looking out at the storm. Sarah watched him, noting the way his uniform fit his tall frame, the confidence set of his shoulders. When he turned back to face her, his expression was serious. Sarah, I need to tell you something. What I said about this mission being an assessment. That was true, but not in the way you might think. Sarah felt her stomach tighten with apprehension. What do you mean? We've been investigating some irregularities in ammunition inventory across several bases. Someone has been systematically removing small quantities of specialized ordnance. Not enough to trigger normal accounting procedures, but enough to suggest organized theft. Here? At Jacksonville? We don't know yet. That's what tonight is about. But what I do know is that whoever is responsible has inside knowledge of our security procedures and access to classified information about ammunition storage and transportation. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. Are you saying there's a security breach involving base personnel? It's possible. Which is why your reaction tonight was so important. The way you handled our arrival, your insistence on following proper procedures, your attention to detail, all of it demonstrated that you're not part of any security problem. You were testing me? Jack moved closer to her desk. Initially, yes. But, Sarah, what developed between us tonight, that wasn't part of any test. That was real, and it was unexpected, and it's something I need to figure out how to handle. Sarah stood to face him, her emotions churning. Handle how? Military regulations are clear about relationships between officers and enlisted personnel. What's not clear is how to handle situations where two people connect in ways that transcend normal military relationships. Are you saying we've connected? Jack stepped closer, close enough that Sarah could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. I'm saying that in 8 years of special operations, I've never met anyone who made me forget about protocol and regulations and chain of command the way you have tonight. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she was sure Jack could hear it. What does that mean for us? I don't know yet. But I know I want to find out. Before either of them could say anything else, the radio crackled again. This time it was the chief petty officer who had arrived with Jack. Commander Mitchell, we've completed the preliminary assessment. Ready for your final inspection when convenient. Jack reached for the radio. Copy that. On my way. He replaced the microphone and looked back at Sarah. I have to go finish this. I know. But, Sarah, this conversation isn't over. What's happening between us, it's not something I can just walk away from. I don't want you to walk away from it. Jack moved toward the door, then stopped. When my team finishes tonight, we'll be filing our report and returning to our base. But I'll be back. This investigation is going to require follow-up, and I'm going to request that you be assigned as our local liaison. Is that allowed? It's within my authority to request specific personnel for security operations. And, after tonight, you're the only person on this base I completely trust. With that, Jack opened the door and stepped back into the storm. Sarah watched until he disappeared into the darkness, then sank back into her chair. Her entire world had shifted in the course of a few hours. She had started the evening as Petty Officer Second Class Martinez, dutiful and professional and predictable. She was ending it as Sarah, a woman who had discovered that she was capable of connections and feelings she had never experienced before. The rest of her watch passed in a blur. At 0312 hours, she saw the sedan leaving the depot area, headlights cutting through the diminishing rain. She wondered if Jack was looking toward the guard booth as they passed, wondered if he was thinking about their conversation and what it might mean for both of their futures. When her relief arrived at 0600 hours, Sarah completed her watch reports with meticulous detail. Everything had been routine and unremarkable, according to the official record. No mention of SEAL commanders or security assessments or conversations that changed everything. But, as Sarah walked across the base toward her quarters, she knew that nothing would ever be routine or unremarkable again. Jack Mitchell had shown her a version of herself she hadn't known existed, and had promised to return to explore what that might mean. For the first time in her naval career, Sarah found herself counting the hours until her next watch assignment, hoping it would bring another opportunity to see the man who had turned her carefully ordered world upside down in the space of a single stormy night. 3 days passed before Sarah heard anything more about Commander Mitchell's investigation. During those 72 hours, she found herself scrutinizing every detail of her normal duties with renewed intensity, as if seeing her base through Jack's eyes might reveal clues she had previously missed. She also found herself thinking about their conversation far more than was probably wise for someone trying to maintain professional focus. On Thursday morning, Chief Williams approached Sarah during her routine maintenance inspection of the communication equipment. His expression was serious, and Sarah immediately sensed that this wasn't a casual check-in. "Martinez, I need to speak with you privately," Chief Williams said, glancing around the communications room to ensure they were alone. "Of course, Chief. Is there something wrong?" "Not wrong, exactly. But there have been some developments related to the other night's security assessment." Chief Williams lowered his voice. "Commander Mitchell has requested that you be temporarily assigned to provide liaison support for an ongoing investigation." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Jack had kept his promise. "What kind of liaison support, Chief?" "You'll be briefed on the details, but, essentially you'll be working directly with the SEAL team to provide base knowledge and security assistance. This is a significant opportunity, Martinez. Commander Mitchell specifically requested you based on your performance during their initial assessment. When does this assignment begin?" "Immediately. You're to report to Conference Room Alpha at 1400 hours for your initial briefing." Chief Williams studied her face carefully. "This is sensitive work, Martinez. The kind of assignment that can make a career if handled properly." "I understand, Chief. I won't let you down. I know you won't. That's why I approved the request." After Chief Williams left, Sarah tried to focus on her remaining morning duties, but her mind kept wandering to the upcoming briefing. She would be seeing Jack again in just a few hours, but this time in an official capacity, working together on what sounded like a serious investigation. The prospect was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. At 1355 hours, Sarah stood outside Conference Room Alpha, checking her uniform one final time before knocking on the door. Jack's voice called for her to enter, and she stepped inside to find him seated at a conference table with 2 other personnel she didn't recognize. "Petty Officer Martinez reporting as requested, sir," Sarah said, snapping to attention. Jack stood and gestured for her to take a seat. "Thank you for coming, Sarah. Please, have a seat. I'd like you to meet the rest of the team." The introductions were brief but revealing. Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Torres was a Navy intelligence specialist with expertise in internal security investigations. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson was a master-at-arms with extensive experience in criminal investigations within military communities. Together with Jack, they formed a formidable investigative team. "Before we begin," Jack said, "I need to establish the classified nature of this briefing. Everything we discuss in this room is to be treated as top secret. Do you understand and agree to these conditions?" "Yes, sir, I understand and agree." Jack activated a recording device and formally established the classification level and participants of the briefing. His manner was completely professional, but Sarah caught brief moments when his eyes met hers with an intensity that reminded her of their conversation in the guard booth. Lieutenant Commander Torres took the lead in explaining the investigation. "Over the past 6 months, we've identified a pattern of missing ammunition and specialized equipment across 5 naval installations along the East Coast. The thefts are sophisticated, involving someone with detailed knowledge of inventory procedures and access to storage facilities." She spread several photographs across the table. Sarah recognized some of the ammunition types from her time working in supply logistics before her current assignment. The missing items include specialized rounds, explosive devices, and electronic components that could be used to construct improvised weapons or sold to hostile parties, Torres continued. The total value exceeds $2 million, but, more importantly, these materials could pose a significant security threat if they fall into the wrong hands. Chief Thompson leaned forward. What makes this particularly concerning is that the thefts suggest inside knowledge. Someone familiar with our security procedures, inventory systems, and storage protocols. Jack resumed control of the briefing. Our investigation has identified several potential connection points between the affected bases. Jacksonville is one of them. We need someone with intimate knowledge of this base's operations and personnel to help us identify possible suspects and security vulnerabilities. Sarah studied the materials spread before her. What makes you think Jacksonville is involved? 2 items that were stolen from Norfolk last month were originally shipped from Jacksonville's depot. The transfer records show they should have arrived at Norfolk, but there's no documentation of their actual receipt, Torres explained. Could it be a paperwork error? Possible, but unlikely. The missing items were specifically requested by Norfolk for a training exercise that never took place. Someone knew about the transfer and intercepted the shipment. Jack looked directly at Sarah. We need your help identifying who had access to that transfer information and who might have been in a position to intercept the shipment. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. This wasn't just about working with Jack anymore, this was about protecting national security and identifying a traitor within her own community. What do you need me to do? For starters, we need detailed information about personnel who have access to ammunition transfer records. We also need to understand the physical security procedures for shipments leaving the base, Chief Thompson said. I can provide that information, but I'll need to access records from departments outside my normal clearance level. Jack nodded. That's already been arranged. You'll have temporary access to all relevant databases and personnel files. But, Sarah, I need you to understand something important. The use of her first name in front of the other team members didn't go unnoticed. Sarah saw Torres and Thompson exchange a brief glance. This investigation could put you in a difficult position. If there is a security breach involving Jacksonville personnel, you might be asked to provide information about colleagues, people you work with every day. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Commander, my loyalty is to the Navy and to national security. If someone is betraying that trust, I want them identified and stopped. Even if it's someone you know personally? Especially if it's someone I know personally. Anyone who would steal military weapons and put our security at risk doesn't deserve my protection or loyalty. Jack smiled slightly, the first time his professional demeanor had cracked during the briefing. I thought that would be your answer. Lieutenant Commander Torres consulted her notes. We'll need you to review personnel files for anyone with access to ammunition inventories over the past year. Look for patterns, unusual behavior, financial difficulties, anything that might suggest vulnerability to recruitment by hostile parties. Also, Chief Thompson added, we need you to help us identify the best way to conduct discreet surveillance of suspect personnel without alerting them to our investigation. Sarah nodded, understanding the complexity of what they were asking. How long do we have? Intelligence suggests another theft is planned within the next 2 weeks, Jack said. We need to identify the perpetrators before they can strike again. The briefing continued for another hour, with Sarah receiving detailed instructions about her role in the investigation. She would maintain her normal duties while conducting research and analysis for the team. They would meet daily to review findings and adjust their approach based on new information. As the meeting concluded, Torres and Thompson gathered their materials and prepared to leave. Jack lingered behind, ostensibly to review some final details with Sarah. How are you feeling about this assignment? He asked once they were alone. Professionally? I'm honored to be selected and committed to doing whatever it takes to protect our security. And, personally? Sarah hesitated. The question was loaded with implications about their developing relationship and the challenges of working together in an official capacity. Personally, I'm trying to figure out how to balance my feelings about our connection with the demands of this investigation. Jack moved closer, lowering his voice even though they were alone. I've been thinking about that too. Sarah, what's happening between us, it's not going away just because we're working together officially. I know. But it does complicate things. Everything worth having is complicated. The question is whether we can handle the complexity while still doing our jobs effectively. Sarah looked into his eyes, seeing the same intensity that had captivated her during their first meeting. "I think we can. But, we'll need to be careful about maintaining professional boundaries in front of the team." "Agreed. Torres and Thompson are good people, but they don't need to know about our personal connection until we figure out what it means ourselves." Jack reached into his briefcase and withdrew a secure communication device. "This is for you. It's encrypted and will allow us to communicate directly without going through normal channels. Use it if you discover anything urgent or if you need to reach me for any reason." When Sarah took the device, their hands brushed again, sending the same electric sensation through her body that she had felt in the guard booth. Jack's expression suggested he felt it too. "There's something else," Jack said. "Tomorrow evening, I'd like to take you to dinner. Off base, somewhere we can talk freely about the investigation and other things." Sarah's heart rate increased. "Is that wise, given the circumstances?" "Probably not. But I don't care about wise right now. I care about getting to know you better. Jack, if we're discovered, we won't be. And even if we are, what we do off-duty is our business as long as it doesn't compromise our professional responsibilities." Sarah considered the risks and the potential consequences. Then, she thought about the way Jack made her feel, the sense of possibility and excitement that she had never experienced before. "All right. Dinner tomorrow night." Jack's smile was brilliant. "Good. I'll pick you up at 1900 hours at the main gate. Should I ask where we're going?" "Somewhere quiet where we can talk without interruption. Trust me." As Jack prepared to leave, Sarah called his name. "Jack? What if this investigation reveals something that puts us on opposite sides? What if the security breach involves someone I'm close to?" Jack stopped and turned back to face her. "Then, we deal with it together. Sarah, whatever this investigation reveals, whatever complications arise, I want you to know that my feelings for you are separate from my professional obligations. They're real, and they're not going to change based on what we discover." After Jack left, Sarah remained in the conference room for several minutes, trying to process everything that had happened. In the space of one briefing, she had become involved in a serious national security investigation and agreed to what was essentially a date with a SEAL commander. Both developments would have significant implications for her future, but she couldn't bring herself to regret either decision. That evening, Sarah began her review of personnel files with the methodical approach that had earned her Jack's respect. She created spreadsheets tracking access privileges, cross-referenced duty assignments with theft timelines, and noted any unusual patterns in behavior or financial records. After several hours of work, one name began to emerge as potentially significant. Petty Officer First Class David Chun had access to ammunition inventories, had been present during all relevant transfer periods, and had recently applied for a transfer to civilian contractor status. More concerning, his financial records showed significant unexplained deposits over the past 6 months. Sarah stared at Chen's file, feeling a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal dismay. She had worked with Chen on several occasions and had always found him competent and reliable. The possibility that he might be involved in weapons theft felt like a personal betrayal. But, as she reviewed the evidence, the pattern became increasingly clear. Chen had means, motive, and opportunity. He also had something else, a gambling problem that had recently escalated according to counseling reports in his personnel file. Sarah documented her findings carefully, preparing to present them to Jack and the team the next day. As she worked, she felt the weight of responsibility that came with this kind of investigation. People's lives and careers would be affected by her analysis, and she was determined to be thorough and accurate. At the same time, she found herself looking forward to her dinner with Jack with an anticipation that surprised her. Despite the serious nature of their professional collaboration, she couldn't ignore the personal connection that continued to grow stronger with each interaction. By the time Sarah finished her initial analysis, it was nearly midnight. As she prepared to leave the office, she realized that in one day, her life had changed dramatically once again. She was no longer just Petty Officer Martinez doing her duty, she was Sarah Martinez, a woman involved in a complex investigation with a man who challenged and excited her in ways she was still learning to understand. The next 24 hours would bring their first official dinner together and, potentially, the identification of a dangerous security threat. Sarah wasn't sure which prospect made her more nervous, but she knew that both would be significant steps in a journey that was unlike anything she had ever experienced before. The restaurant Jack had chosen was a small waterfront establishment about 20 miles from the base, far enough to ensure privacy but close enough to maintain reasonable deniability if they were seen together. Sarah arrived at the main gate precisely at 1900 hours, dressed in civilian clothes that felt strange after days of constant uniform wear. She had chosen a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes and low heels that wouldn't mark her as obviously military. Jack was waiting in an unmarked civilian vehicle, and when he stepped out to greet her, Sarah was struck once again by his commanding presence. Out of uniform, he looked somehow more approachable but no less impressive. He wore dark slacks and a button-down shirt that emphasized his broad shoulders and athletic build. "You look beautiful," he said, opening the passenger door for her. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." The drive to the restaurant was filled with careful conversation about neutral topics, both of them aware that they were transitioning from their professional relationship to something more personal. Sarah noticed that Jack drove with the same precision he brought to everything else, alert to his surroundings but relaxed in a way she hadn't seen during their official interactions. The restaurant was exactly what Sarah would have hoped for: intimate without being romantic, private without being secretive. They were seated at a corner table with a view of the harbor, far enough from other diners to speak freely. "Before we talk about anything else," Jack said once they had ordered, "I want to hear about your analysis of the personnel files. What did you find?" Sarah had prepared for this, knowing that their professional obligations would need to be addressed before they could explore the personal aspects of their relationship. She opened a folder she had brought and spread several documents across the table. "I identified 3 individuals with the access and opportunity to be involved in the thefts," she began. "But one name stands out significantly." Jack leaned forward, his attention completely focused on her analysis. "Petty Officer First Class David Chen. He has unrestricted access to ammunition inventories, was present during all relevant transfer periods, and has unexplained financial deposits totaling approximately $40,000 over the past 6 months. Gambling debts? That's what I thought initially. His file shows he's been receiving counseling for gambling addiction. But when I look deeper, the timeline doesn't match. The large deposits began before his gambling problems became serious enough to require intervention." Jack examined the financial records Sarah had copied. "This looks like payment for services rather than gambling winnings." "That's my assessment as well. The deposits are too regular and too large to be explained by gambling luck." "What else do you know about Chun personally?" Sarah hesitated. This was where the investigation became personal and painful. "I've worked with him on several occasions. He's always seemed competent and reliable. I would never have suspected him of something like this." "That's often how these things work, Sarah. The most successful inside threats are people who appear completely trustworthy." "I know. It's just difficult to accept that someone I respected could be betraying everything we swore to protect." Jack reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The gesture was intimate and comforting, and Sarah felt some of her tension ease. "You did good work identifying him. Now we need to figure out how to build a case that will stand up in court. What's the next step?" "We set up surveillance and try to catch him in the act. But that's going to require your continued cooperation, and it might put you in some danger." Sarah looked into Jack's eyes, seeing concern there that went beyond professional worry. "What kind of danger?" "If Chen realizes we're investigating him, he might try to eliminate evidence or witnesses. People who betray their country for money often escalate to violence when they're cornered. Are you trying to scare me away from the investigation?" Jack's grip on her hand tightened slightly. "I'm trying to make sure you understand the risks. Sarah, if something happened to you because I brought you into this, nothing is going to happen to me. And even if it did, that would be my choice to accept the risk." Jack studied her face for a long moment. "You're remarkable, you know that? I'm just doing my job." "No, it's more than that. You have integrity and courage that can't be taught. Those are qualities that make someone truly exceptional." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the sincerity in Jack's voice. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know that you follow proper procedures even when it's inconvenient. I know that you're willing to investigate people you like and respect when duty requires it. I know that you're sitting here agreeing to help catch a dangerous criminal despite the personal risks involved. Their food arrived, providing a natural break in the intensity of the conversation. As they ate, Jack began sharing more about his own background and experiences. Sarah learned that he had grown up in rural Tennessee, the son of a high school teacher and a factory worker. He had joined the Navy to pay for college but discovered a passion for special operations that had shaped his entire adult life. "Do you ever regret not having a more conventional life?" Sarah asked. "Sometimes. Especially when I see what my civilian friends have: stable relationships, homes, kids. There are sacrifices that come with this career. But you keep choosing it." "I do. Because I believe the work matters. But, Sarah, for the first time in years, I'm starting to wonder if there might be room in my life for something more than just the mission." The implication was clear, and Sarah felt her heart rate increase. "What are you saying?" Jack set down his fork and looked directly at her. "I'm saying that meeting you has made me reconsider some of my assumptions about what I want my future to look like." "Jack, we've known each other for less than a week." "I know. Which is what makes this so surprising. I've never connected with anyone as quickly or as deeply as I have with you." Sarah took a sip of wine, trying to organize her thoughts. "This is all happening very fast." "Yes, it is. Does that bother you?" "It should bother me. It goes against everything I thought I knew about myself and how relationships develop." Sarah paused, considering her words carefully. "But it doesn't bother me. If anything, it feels like the most natural thing in the world." Jack smiled, and Sarah saw relief in his expression. "I was hoping you felt that way too." "I do. But, Jack, we need to be realistic about the complications. The military regulations, the difference in our ranks, the investigation we're working on together. We'll figure it out. People have navigated more complicated situations." "Have they? How many SEAL commanders have successful relationships with enlisted personnel?" Jack's expression became more serious. "You're right that it's complicated. But, Sarah, regulations exist to prevent abuse of power and conflicts of interest. What's happening between us isn't about power or advantage. It's about two people who have found something real and unexpected. And if your superiors don't see it that way, then I'll deal with the consequences. But I'm not going to walk away from the best thing that's happened to me in years because of regulations that don't really apply to our situation." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Jack was essentially saying he was willing to risk his career for their relationship, which was both romantic and terrifying. "What about the investigation? If Chen is as dangerous as you think, won't our relationship complicate your ability to protect me?" "Actually, it might be the opposite. My feelings for you ensure that I'll be even more motivated to keep you safe." They finished dinner discussing the practical aspects of their next steps in the investigation. Chen would be placed under discreet surveillance beginning the next morning. Sarah would continue her normal duties while watching for any unusual behavior from Chen or his associates. They would maintain regular communication through the encrypted device Jack had given her. As Jack drove Sarah back to the base, she found herself thinking about how dramatically her life had changed. A week ago, her biggest concern had been whether she would receive a favorable evaluation on her next performance review. Now she was involved in a national security investigation and developing feelings for a man who challenged every assumption she had ever made about love and relationships. "Sarah," Jack said as they approached the base, "I want you to know that regardless of what happens with the investigation or with us personally, working with you has been one of the best experiences of my career." "For me too. Though I have to admit, it's also been one of the most confusing experiences of my life." Jack pulled into a parking area near the base entrance and turned to face her. "Confused how?" "I've always thought of myself as someone who makes careful, logical decisions. Someone who weighs consequences and follows established procedures. But, with you, I feel like I'm operating on instinct and emotion." "Is that bad?" "I don't know. It's different. Scary, but also exciting." Jack reached over and took her hand. "Sarah, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." "Okay." If we pursue this relationship, it's going to require trust and honesty on a level that goes beyond normal dating. We'll be navigating military regulations, a dangerous investigation, and our own feelings all at the same time. Are you prepared for that level of complexity? Sarah considered the question seriously. She thought about her father's teachings about integrity and duty, about her own goals and values, and about the way Jack made her feel when he looked at her the way he was looking at her now. I'm prepared to try, she said finally. I can't promise I'll handle everything perfectly, but I can promise I'll be honest with you about my feelings and my concerns. Jack lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her palm gently. The gesture was intimate and sweet, and Sarah felt a rush of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. That's all I can ask for, Jack said softly. As Sarah prepared to get out of the car, Jack caught her arm gently. One more thing. Tomorrow, when we're back to working together officially, we need to be completely professional. Torres and Thompson can't suspect anything until we figure out how to handle this properly. I understand. Professional partners during the day, whatever this is during our personal time. Exactly. Sarah walked toward the base entrance, very aware that Jack was watching until she was safely inside. As she made her way to her quarters, she reflected on the evening and what it meant for her future. She was falling for a man who was as complex and challenging as he was compelling, and she was doing it in the middle of an investigation that could have serious consequences for both of their careers. But, despite the uncertainty and the risks, Sarah felt more alive and purposeful than she ever had before. Whatever came next, she knew that meeting Jack Mitchell had fundamentally changed her understanding of what she wanted from life and what she was willing to fight for. The next morning would bring new challenges and potentially dangerous developments in their investigation of David Chen. But tonight, as Sarah fell asleep, she allowed herself to imagine a future that included both her naval career and a relationship with the most remarkable man she had ever met. What she didn't know was that their investigation was about to take a turn that would test both their professional skills and their personal trust in ways neither of them was prepared for. Chen was more dangerous than they realized, and he was already aware that someone was getting too close to his operation. The surveillance operation began at 0600 hours the following morning. Sarah maintained her normal routine while keeping careful watch for any unusual activity from Petty Officer Chen. She had positioned herself at her usual workstation in the communications center, which provided a clear view of the ammunition depot access routes and Chen's normal duty locations. At 0847 hours, Sarah noticed Chen having an intense conversation with someone she didn't recognize near the supply building. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but something about Chen's body language suggested urgency and stress. Sarah immediately used her encrypted communication device to alert Jack. Contact observed. Chen meeting with unknown civilian near supply building. Conversation appeared urgent. Jack's response came within minutes. Copy that. We have eyes on. Continue normal activities. Sarah spent the morning documenting Chen's movements and interactions. Everything appeared routine until approximately 1130 hours, when Chen received a phone call that visibly agitated him. After ending the call, he immediately left his duty station and headed toward the ammunition depot. This was highly irregular. Chen wasn't scheduled for depot access during his current shift, and he would need special authorization to enter the restricted area. Sarah watched as Chen approached the depot security checkpoint and presented what appeared to be legitimate access credentials to the guard on duty. Sarah's encrypted device buzzed with an incoming message from Jack. Chen entering depot with unauthorized access. Moving to intercept. Maintain your position and be ready to provide backup if needed. Within minutes, Sarah saw Jack and Chief Thompson approaching the depot area from different directions. They moved with the practiced coordination of experienced operators, using buildings and vehicles for concealment as they closed in on Chen's position. What happened next caught everyone by surprise. Chen emerged from the depot carrying a large duffel bag, but instead of heading toward the parking area or his usual duty station, he began moving rapidly toward a section of perimeter fencing that Sarah knew was rarely patrolled during daylight hours. Sarah realized that Chen was attempting to escape with stolen materials, and his route would take him past her position at the communications center. Without thinking, she left her workstation and positioned herself to intercept Chen's path. Chen! Stop where you are! Sarah called out as the petty officer approached her location. Chen looked up, startled, and Sarah saw fear and desperation in his eyes. For a moment, she hoped he would surrender peacefully. Instead, Chen dropped the duffel bag and pulled a sidearm from his uniform. "Stay back, Martinez. You don't know what you're dealing with here." Sarah raised her hands, trying to appear non-threatening while scanning the area for cover. "David, whatever's going on, we can work it out. Just put the weapon down. It's too late for that. They're going to kill me either way." Chen's voice was shaking, and Sarah realized he was more terrified than threatening. "Who's going to kill you? David, talk to me. Tell me what's happening." Chen glanced around nervously, apparently looking for escape routes while keeping his weapon trained on Sarah. "The people I was working for, they found out about the investigation. They want me to eliminate any evidence, including witnesses." Sarah felt ice in her veins. Chen wasn't just a thief, he had become an assassin. "David, I'm not your enemy here. Put the gun down and let's figure this out together." "I can't. You don't understand. My sister, they have my sister. If I don't do what they want, they'll kill her." The desperation in Chen's voice was heartbreaking, and Sarah realized she was dealing with someone who was as much a victim as a perpetrator. "Where is your sister? Maybe we can help her. She's being held somewhere in Jacksonville. They grabbed her 3 days ago when they found out the SEALs were investigating." Sarah heard movement behind her and realized that Jack and the team were getting into position. She needed to keep Chen talking until they could safely intervene. "David, the people you're working for, they're not going to let you or your sister go even if you do what they want. You know that, right? The only way to save her is to work with us." Chen's weapon hand was shaking now, and Sarah could see tears on his face. "I tried to get out. I told them I was done after the first few thefts, but they wouldn't let me quit. They said I was in too deep." "How did it start?" "Gambling debts. I owed money to the wrong people, and they offered me a way to pay it off. Just a few items from inventory, they said. Nobody would notice." Sarah took a small step closer, hoping to get within range to disarm Chen if necessary. But it didn't stop there. It never stops. Every time I thought I was done, they wanted more. Bigger items, more sensitive materials. When I tried to refuse, they threatened my family. "David, we can protect your sister. Commander Mitchell and his team, they're specialists in this kind of situation. But you have to help us." Chen looked around wildly, apparently realizing that he was surrounded. Sarah could see Jack moving carefully through the trees to her left, positioning himself for a clear shot if Chen threatened her. "It's too late," Chen said, his voice breaking. "They're going to kill all of us." "No, they're not. But, David, you need to put the weapon down right now. If Commander Mitchell thinks you're going to hurt me, he's going to take action." Chen seemed to realize for the first time that he was outmaneuvered. He looked at the weapon in his hand as though surprised to find it there. "I never wanted to hurt anyone, Martinez. I just wanted to protect my family." "I know. And that's exactly what we're going to do. But first, you need to put the gun down." Slowly, carefully, Chen began to lower his weapon. Sarah felt relief flooding through her as the immediate threat diminished. But just as Chen was about to place the gun on the ground, a shot rang out from somewhere behind Sarah. Chen spun and fell, clutching his shoulder. The duffel bag he had been carrying split open, revealing sophisticated electronic equipment and what appeared to be explosive devices. Jack emerged from concealment, his weapon drawn and trained on Chen. "Are you hurt?" Jack called to Sarah, his eyes never leaving Chen. "I'm fine." David's hit in the shoulder. Chief Thompson appeared from another direction, followed by Lieutenant Commander Torres and several base security personnel. The area was quickly secured, and Chen was provided with medical attention while being taken into custody. As the immediate crisis passed, Sarah found herself shaking with adrenaline and emotion. She had come within minutes of being shot by someone she had worked with and trusted. The realization of how close she had come to serious injury or death was overwhelming. Jack approached her carefully, holstering his weapon. "Sarah, are you sure you're not hurt?" "I'm okay. Shaken, but okay." Jack pulled her into his arms without regard for the other personnel in the area. The embrace was brief but fierce, and Sarah could feel tension leaving his body as he assured himself that she was safe. "You did good work," he said softly. "Getting him to talk like that, keeping him calm until we could intervene. That was professional and brave. He was going to kill me, wasn't he? I think he was supposed to, but I don't think he had the heart for it. Chen's a victim in this as much as he's a perpetrator." Lieutenant Commander Torres approached them, her expression serious. "We found Chen's sister. She's safe, being held at a house in Jacksonville. Local police are coordinating with us to take down the rest of the operation." Sarah felt relief that Chen's sister was safe, but she also realized that the investigation was far from over. "How many others are involved?" "We're still determining that. But, Sarah, your work identifying Chen as the primary suspect was crucial to breaking this open. Without your analysis, we might never have connected the thefts to the larger criminal organization." As the crime scene was processed and reports were filed, Sarah found herself reflecting on everything that had happened since the night Jack had first appeared at her guard post. In less than 2 weeks, her life had changed completely. She had participated in a major national security investigation, faced life-threatening danger, and fallen in love with a man who challenged everything she thought she knew about herself. That evening, after all the official debriefings and paperwork were complete, Jack found Sarah in her quarters. She was still processing the day's events and trying to understand her own emotions about what had transpired. "How are you doing?" Jack asked, settling into the chair across from her small desk. "I keep thinking about David. How scared he was, how trapped he felt. It makes me angry that criminals would exploit someone's desperation like that. Unfortunately, that's often how these operations work. They target people with vulnerabilities and gradually draw them in until escape seems impossible." Sarah looked at Jack, noting the exhaustion in his face. The investigation had been demanding for all of them, but, as the team leader, he had carried the greatest responsibility. "What happens now?" "Chen will likely cooperate with our investigation in exchange for leniency and protection for his sister. The criminal organization behind the thefts will be dismantled. And the stolen weapons will be recovered before they can be used against American interests." "I meant what happens with us." Jack's expression became more personal and vulnerable. "That depends on what you want to happen." Sarah considered everything they had been through together. The professional collaboration, the personal connection, the mutual trust that had developed under extraordinary circumstances. "I want to find out what this could become if we give it a real chance." Jack smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression she had seen from him since the morning's crisis. "Even knowing how complicated it's going to be?" "Especially knowing how complicated it's going to be. Jack, today when I saw David pointing that weapon, when I realized I might not survive to see what happened between us, I understood something important." "What's that?" "Life is too short and too uncertain to pass up something real because it's inconvenient or complicated. What we have, this connection we found, it's worth fighting for." Jack stood and moved closer to her. "Sarah, I need you to know something. When I saw Chen threatening you today, when I realized you were in danger, I felt something I've never experienced before." "What did you feel?" "Terror. Pure, absolute terror at the possibility of losing you. In that moment, I realized that somewhere along the way, you had become the most important thing in my world." Sarah rose to meet him, and, when Jack took her in his arms this time, there was no hesitation, no concern about regulations or propriety. There was only the certainty that they had found something extraordinary together. "I love you," Jack said simply. "I love you too." As they held each other, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a routine watch assignment and an unexpected encounter with a SEAL commander who had seen something in her that she was only beginning to understand herself. The investigation was complete, but their story was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead as they navigated their careers and their relationship, but Sarah no longer had any doubt that they would face those challenges together. 6 months later, Sarah received orders transferring her to a joint operations unit where her skills in security analysis and her experience working with special operations teams made her an invaluable asset. Jack had requested her specifically for his team, and their relationship had been officially disclosed and approved by their commanding officers. Their wedding was a small ceremony attended by their families and closest military colleagues. As they exchanged vows, Sarah reflected on the truth that sometimes the most important moments in life arrive unannounced, wearing combat boots and carrying the promise of everything you never knew you wanted. What had begun as a simple watch assignment had become a love story that neither of them had seen coming. And, as they began their new life together, both Sarah and Jack knew that the best parts of their story were still to be written.